Everything we don't want is thrown into the garbage and is usually picked up by the local sanitation workers, or as we call them, garbage men. Usually whatever you have stuffed in trash cans or bags gets dumped into a truck without a second glance. And some terrifying things happen to garbage men every day. So here are 4 disturbing garbage man horror stories. Since we gotten to know one another a little, I'll shift the tone of our tale to something more life-changing. Perhaps a tad gory for some. You have been warned. As you may imagine, the job of the classic garbage man can be dangerous at times. It's not uncommon to have 5 or more men out due to injury at any one time. A few more doing light duty in addition. The ways you can hurt the spans, the spectrum. You can scratch a cornea one week, as I did, then suffer a heat stroke the next. I myself, in the almost 3 years working there, injured both knees, scratched both corneas, pinched nerves in both arms, and finally had the back injury that would ultimately end my career. It wasn't just me that suffered problems. 2 men had heart attacks while on the job, and my own partner on a truck had a job-ending back injury in a year prior to mine. Many of these accidents would happen to more than one man during their time throwing trash, but one specific life-altering injury will likely occur only once. This accident was and is still the most horrid known among my former colleagues at the time it happened. We were all fairly beat down from the summer heat, and several guys made small mistakes causing them to be injured. Until you worked 10 or more hours a day, 4 days, and sometimes 5 days a week in the heat of a Texas summer, can you know how physically draining it can be? You can imagine how easy it is when you're worn out from a long, hot day of work to make stupid mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes can result in life-changing accidents. It was many hours into a shift when the news of the accident began being passed on the radio. Nobody knew at the time how bad it was or would ultimately be. No one but the 2 guys on the truck where it happened. I must first give you an idea of how the trucks work before I get more specific. On the back of the passenger side of our style of trucks are 2 handles. These handles allow you to open the scooper so it can come down and lift the trash can into the storage area of the truck. If you need a better idea of what I mean, there are several good videos on YouTube available. On our older trucks, which we only had half a dozen left, the handles cannot be run while the truck is moving. This was changed on the newer generation of the trucks most of us drove. Often on a light day when we were in a hurry to get done and go home, we would clear the bucket on the move. This saved a lot of time. The 2 guys on that truck that day were doing exactly this when the accident happened. The guy on the back, who was the one picking up the bags and throwing and running the handles, would on occasion have to step off the side step and onto the edge of the bucket to avoid things like hanging tree limbs. This is how it happened. From what we heard later, the guy on the back was running the bucket down between alleys When the truck turned into the next one, he had to quickly step onto the edge of the bucket. Unfortunately, the scooper was already on its way down when he lost his foot and had his lower leg and ankle wedged between the edge of the scooper and the bucket. Naturally, he was in severe pain, but it was about to get worse because he was clearly unable to think straight. Instead of grabbing and pulling on the handle to open the scooper, he mistakenly pushed against both handles, causing the scooper to curl under the trash and in the bucket, pulling him deeper into it and causing his legs even more pain. The driver, and crushing his legs even more. The driver told us the same day that despite having the radio cranked up, the windows also rolled up, and the AC on max, he could hear his partner screaming clearly. The screaming got his attention immediately when he looked over at the reverse camera, but what he saw confused him at first. He said it was like he was being sucked into the back of the truck, feet first, which in all reality he actually was. He was waving his hands frantically as it happened, even though he wasn't sure precisely what was occurring. It was obviously bad. He put the truck in neutral and set the brake and ran to the back. When he could finally see what was going on, he said he almost started screaming himself. It must have been a terrible sight indeed. Running quickly to the passenger side, he pulled open the scooper and his partner's body dropped like a rock into the bucket. At first, the only sounds came from the ideal of the truck, but a few seconds later, the guy started wailing again. His partner could see his ankle was twisted at an angle in his boot, unsure of what to do. He asked the guy if he wanted him to take him into the service center or call an ambulance immediately. Of course, he yelled the word ambulance through gritted teeth. So that's just what his partner did. He knew just as well as any of us that our boss would want him to bring the injured guy in instead, so he didn't call in until the ambulance showed up. The choice would be out of his hands then. When his partner out of action, he was told to return to the service center. This is where he was when I ran into him. The injured guy said the pain wasn't nearly as bad when it happened. The yelling and screeching was more of the result. Shocking circumstances, however, by the time he made it to the yard, it was far worse. This was also when the results of his head striking the back of the truck first made itself known. It was determined later that day that he had a severe concussion in addition to the leg injury. When I visited him that evening, the doctors had yet to discover the full extent of the injury to the leg and foot. It wasn't until almost a year later, when I spoke to his partner, did I find out that he had lost his foot despite all the doctor's attempt. Even after multiple surgeries, the damage was just too great and they were unable to save it. I don't think any of us at the time, including the injured guy himself, realized how bad the injury was. Don't get me wrong, we were freaked out just hearing about it, but I don't think I know anyone that's had that type of accident who's lost his foot because of it. It's possible I never grasped the magnitude of the injury. This may show through in the way I've described it in this story, but like I said, I didn't witness it happen. Even when I visited him that night, his entire leg was wrapped up and under a bucket. From that day, I found out about the loss. I focused as diligently as I could to not have anything like that happen to me. Even after it became clear that my back was too damaged for me to do any meaningful work again, I counted myself lucky to still have not turned out like him, and I continue to do so every day. That's about all I have for that one. On February 24, 1999, Michael Ruiz would be accidentally killed in a fight with one of his fellow sanitation engineers outside their place of work. The death was ultimately judged as an act of self-defense. The other member involved in the altercation stated on multiple occasions that he was attacked from behind by Ruiz. The two men who witnessed the fight agreed with the defendant. One of them said later, "He pounced on Tony," the defendant, "like he was possessed by a rabid animal. I never seen him act that way before." Tony had no choice but to fight back when Mike went for his eyes. It was obvious that this had become a fight for his life. The evening of his death, the police carefully searched Ruiz's home, hoping to discover a motive to the attack on his co-worker. What they would discover shed light on the inner mind of a man in the depths of a psychological collapse, and the events that led to it unknown to anyone other than the officers there that day. Ruiz himself, Tony Campbell, the defendant, had prevented a terrible act of bloodshed from happening a mere 2 days later. The following paragraphs come from a notebook of papers written by Ruiz. It documents the awful plan he was soon to set into action and the unfortunate events that he felt justified him to strike out against his enemies, quote, on enemies. Although few names of people and locations may have been changed or omitted to preserve their privacy, all pertinent information surrounding the actions mentioned above have been left intact. Now I present you all what the media entailed: the bloody plan of Michael Ruiz and the poor excuses for it. My young life was as average as any others. I suppose I was bullied just like anyone else, even though I despised it at the time. It would be my first lesson in the dynamics of power. It's not often discussed, but we all learn our place in the pecking order eventually. No doubt, my bully had been bullied by someone else in his life. He was simply paying it forward in order for me to learn my place in life just as he had. The way in which we are reminded of our place changes as we grow. In college, the professors take the place of the bullies and use their superior position in the school to do so. Once our real life truly starts, our adult one. As long as we remain among our own people, no one should have any reason to knock us back into our place. The only part of our lives this may differ is at our workplace. They're nothing more than a more serious form of school. Anyhow, your boss should really be the single person who can truly be in the right for correcting you, unless, of course, he's nothing more than just another of your peers with a fancy title. At that point, he's on the same level as you and should be, by all rights, keep his mouth shut. From the first day I learned this unfortunate lesson, I lived by this rule. I was confident that as long as I remember my place and stay in it for the remainder of my life, I'd have a decent one. However, on February 26, 1998, I discovered no matter how hard I worked, loved my family, or said my prayers, I couldn't prevent the death of my daughter. The verdict was SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. What kind of answer was that? It in no way tells you actually how she died. It seems to me just another way of saying we don't know what happened when it happened, I was ready to end it all right then. But fortunately, I still had Heather. Everyone around us said that as long as we stuck together, we'd make it through. Time heals all wounds, and the rest of the empty garbage. She didn't even wait 3 months before she left something about my suffocating grief, whatever that's supposed to mean. For the second time that year, I made the decision to check out. But the same people gave me the same platitudes. Although I had no reason to listen, I did. Some force inside me drove me forward. Perhaps I had attempted to get above my station in life and become too proud of the things I had, so I believed them when they told me to let time do its thing. It hadn't been more than 5 months since my life began to collapse before my co-workers began mocking me. As with the other problems, I believed this treatment to be a reminder from my peers that I had let my pride take over. Over time, though, the treatment, the barbs and banter began to take a tone of vindictiveness, and I took my concerns to my supervisor. Instead of the support I had expected, he made it clear that I was in some way responsible for this treatment. This was when it clicked in my head. It wasn't myself that had lost his way. It was those around me who had become eaten up with pride. I could see it clearly now. Fancy cars, expensive vacations to the Bahamas. We were garbage men, for God's sakes. It was me who would be responsible for reminding them of how far they had strayed. The following months flew by quickly as I first formed my plan in my mind and then put it into action. Any free minute I had was used to create in my mind and then build with my hands. As the days grew closer to my deadline, I figured I wouldn't finish my work in time, but if you are reading this, I obviously have and am no longer here to suffer. If you find yourself wondering why I chose the 26th as the day to execute my plan, I figured the anniversary of the day I lost my Anita. No finer a time to remind my peers of how far they have strayed. But the 2 bombs I planted at the administration building have not managed to destroy some, if not all, my co-workers, my supervisor included. I am more than confident the one I planted at his home will at least kill the man who has most lost his way and was responsible for this entire path of retribution I have been forced upon. Ultimately, I am only comforted by the fact that it was me who maintained his true path in life. I pray there is a place I may be stronger together with my Anita once more. Do not damn me for what I've done. I have simply taken upon myself a task no others had the courage to undertake. While browsing through my neighborhood's Facebook page, I came across a post that put the fear of God in me. Although it may not pertain to the area you live in, I felt it wise to share anyway. In order to make the backstory as simple and brief as possible, I'll keep to the main points of the story. Around January of this year, the residents of an affluent neighborhood across town began noticing things missing from their yards. At least, that's how it started. As the weeks passed, their homes started to be burglarized one by one, street by street. The burglaries spread. When April arrived, barely 1% of the homes remained untouched. Probably because most of the residents of those homes were retired and spent their days at home rather than leaving them unattended. The robberies slowed greatly, but never completely stopped. Even after 4 months had passed, the police were no closer to finding a suspect. May was starting to look like the end of the crimes until they accelerated once again in a new neighborhood, this one just a mile from mine. While not as wealthy, these homeowners still have plenty of goodies to draw a thief or thieves to them. I say thief or thieves because at the time, no one was sure of how many crooks there were. Odds said it was more than one, simply due to the number and speed of the crime. Somehow, maybe because the robberies made the cops look bad, the break-ins managed to stay out of the news. One story popped up by June, but was unexplainably buried deep into the back of the building just as before. The thieves blew through house after house, taking anything not nailed down, and got away unseen by anyone. It's often reported all it takes for one person to notice something small to break a case wide open was a little old lady who noticed something strange on her street that would lead to the resolution of this one. She reported that it struck her as strange that the garbage man who had only just picked up her trash returned about an hour later in another truck. This time, however, they only drove up and down streets and never stopped to pick up anything. The report wasn't taken very seriously at first, but a couple of detectives decided to follow up on it. They waited until it was the regular pickup day and watched the habits of the garbage men working that route. At first, all seemed normal. However, a few hours into their stakeout, they noticed 4 men in a different truck turned down an alley in front of them. Continuing to watch the men, the detectives noticed that the truck stopped halfway down the alley and the men approached the rear of a house. This spurred their curiosity and they decided to question the men in the truck. When the men saw the detectives coming, 2 men ran off, but the other 2 stayed where they were, calling for backup. The 2 who had run off were soon picked up. All 4 were arrested and within 4 hours confessed to being part of a burglary ring. They had successfully robbed over 300 homes in our city, despite being a different make of garbage truck. They had taken the extraordinary measures of painting the city logo on the doors of the truck just as our actual ones are. Even crazier was the 4 men were arrested wearing the very same uniforms our trash men wear. The authorities freely admitted that had not that nosy old woman noticed the second truck, they may have not ever caught them. Although they did not catch the men, it came out soon after that the ring they were part of was most likely spanned the entire country and are believed to have killed at least 5 homeowners during burglaries in other states. This is all the information we currently have, and hopefully for your own sakes that this group has not made it into your area and never do. Regardless if this threat exists near you, I felt it was important to pass on this story. While I was in CVS the other day picking up a prescription, I noticed the fall/Thanksgiving themed things were being stocked on the shelves. Every year around this time, when I began seeing these decorations, I'm reminded of a horrible accident I witnessed 5 years ago. This year, although no one I care for was injured in it, the outright shocking nature at the scene and the ultimate result to those who were indeed involved, it still never fails to cast a shadow on the season's gatherings. I'm sure I'm not the only American that finds himself buried in drawers this time of year. The particular day of the wreck, I was in and out of the office all day. The minute I was finally able to dig into work, something else was needed or went wrong. I was on a return trip from Staples taking it easy as I went because a recent freeze combined with an automatic sprinkler made it slippery go. The driver just in front of me had made it halfway through the intersection when they were suddenly T-boned by a trash truck out of nowhere. Instead of stopping right away, both vehicles continued sliding sideways until they were ultimately stopped by a bank building sitting on the corner of the block. I must have stopped myself because once they finally hit the building, I noticed I wasn't moving. The wreck appeared to be moving in slow motion, and it seemed to have lasted several minutes, which, of course, it could not have. Myself and one other guy got out of our cars and ran over to help drivers. When I reached the trash truck, and opened the driver's door, both men were unconscious. The cab of the truck looked as if it was welded to the driver's side of the car. If we were ever going to get her out of the car, we were going to have to back up the truck somehow. A pair of paramedics showed up about this time. We had a quick powwow to figure out our next move. Since the fire truck still hadn't arrived, we volunteered to help them out. Although the female driving the car was conscious, a lot of blood was pouring down her face, and she was very confused. We knew the longer she sat without any medical assistance, the worse she would get. A quick glance at the windshield of the truck told me nothing had changed. Neither man was awake. They could have been dead for all I knew, but I wasn't willing to wait any longer. Climbing into the cab, I pushed the driver aside and searched around until I found the ignition. To everyone's joy, the truck started. Finding the transmission took me a tad longer, but I did. It did fight me at first, but I jiggled the shifter until I got it to engage. As I slowly rolled backwards, the car's door ripped away from the body of the car, giving the paramedics the much-needed access to the driver we all hoped for. Happy that we had enough room to get her out, I killed the ignition in the truck just in time for the truck's drivers to regain consciousness. The fire truck did arrive on the scene soon after having been held up by another multi-car wreck a few blocks away. Now that the pros were all here, me and the other drivers stepped aside and let them do their jobs. Within the hour of all drivers and passengers were on their way to the hospital, and the scene was almost completely cleared up. Confident I wasn't going to get any more work done for the day, I headed home. I kept my eyes on the paper and TV before any news on the condition of those involved in the crash, but it wasn't until the week before Thanksgiving that I heard anything. Unfortunately, the female driver in the car died 3 days after. Although she was healing well and was thought to be going home soon, late one night she threw a blood clot and passed away. And she was not the only one. However, the guy riding shotgun in the trash could never regain consciousness. At some point during the course of the accident, he had a heart attack and died right there. Even though he was the one driving the truck, I don't blame or hold any ill will against the garbage man. He was just another part of many other vehicle accidents that day. I guess if I wanted to be angry at someone, I could point the finger at the businesses who run their sprinklers even during the fall and winter. But I'm not really mad at anyone. This time of the year, it's supposed to be about the meeting of family and all the things we have to be thankful for. And perhaps witnessing the last moments of two people does cast a bit of shadow over the season. Despite all that, I am thankful. Had it been me struck by that truck that day, I may not have been alive to celebrate another holiday with those I love. I can't think of anything better to be thankful